The fighter jet screamed across the Persian Gulf at Mach 1.2, its pilot's hands trembling, not from fear but from what he'd just discovered. Below him, Iranian speedboats swarmed like angry hornets around a cargo ship that wasn't supposed to exist. The ship's manifest said agricultural equipment, but satellite imagery told a different story. Inside those containers weren't tractors. They were the components that kept every F/A-18 Super Hornet in the US Navy flying. And right now, they were 47 seconds away from being seized by a foreign power. What happened next would expose a secret so dangerous that 3 Pentagon officials would resign within a week. Commander Rachel Torres had been flying missions over the Strait of Hormuz for 6 years, but she'd never seen anything like this. The encrypted message from Naval Intelligence came through at SO 347 hours. Divert immediately. Cargo vessel MV Baltic Horizon. Protect at all costs. Do not engage unless fired upon. She banked hard, her Super Hornet responding instantly to her inputs. Through the early morning darkness, she could see the ship, a mid-sized container vessel flying a Liberian flag. Circling it were 7 Iranian Revolutionary Guard speedboats, their mounted machine guns clearly visible even from 15,000 feet. Baltic Horizon, this is US Navy Sierra 27. State your situation, Torres transmitted. Static. Then a panicked voice with a thick Eastern European accent. They're trying to board us. They say we're in Iranian waters, but GPS shows we're international. Torres checked her coordinates. The ship was definitely in international waters. Barely. She descended to 5,000 feet, making her presence known. What Torres didn't know was that the MV Baltic Horizon carried the lifeblood of American naval aviation. Inside those containers were 847 critical components for F/A-18 Super Hornets. Advanced avionics from Malaysia, titanium parts from South Korea, radar systems from Taiwan, and weapons guidance chips from Singapore. The United States had spent decades building the world's most powerful navy, but it had outsourced the very supply chains that kept that navy operational. It was a secret dependency, a vulnerability stretching across 15 countries and 3 oceans. And right now, that entire network was about to be exposed. Torres's radio crackled again. Sierra 27, this is CENTCOM. You are authorized to... The transmission cut off. One of the Iranian boats had fired a warning shot across the Baltic Horizon's bow. Jesus, Torres whispered. Her finger moved closer to the weapons release, but she knew the calculus. Fire on these boats, and she'd trigger a conflict that could shut down 20% of the world's oil supply within hours. Let them seize the ship, and the US Navy's Pacific Fleet could be grounded within weeks. Back in the Pentagon's National Military Command Center, 3-star Admiral James Kellerman was watching the same scene via satellite feed. He'd spent the last 4 hours on encrypted calls with the Secretary of Defense, the CIA Director, and executives from Lockheed Martin and Boeing. How many ships like this are out there right now? The SecDef had asked. Kellerman consulted his brief. At any given moment, 17. Carrying components for everything from Super Hornets to F-35s to drone systems. Sir, we source from 127 foreign suppliers across 34 countries. If any major choke point closes, the Strait of Hormuz, the South China Sea, the Suez Canal, our aviation capabilities start degrading within 72 hours. The silence on the call had been deafening. Now, watching Torres circle above the Baltic Horizon, Kellerman made a decision that would later be called either brilliant or treasonous, depending on who was asked. He opened a direct line to his counterpart in the Iranian Navy, a back channel that officially didn't exist. The ship is carrying civilian manufacturing equipment, Kellerman said in Farsi, a language he'd learned during his 3 tours in the region. You know this. We know this. Let it pass and we'll reroute future shipments through the Cape of Good Hope. You'll never see another one in your waters. 3,000 miles away, in a command center outside Tehran, Admiral Hossein Khanzadi smiled. He'd known exactly what was on that ship. His intelligence service had been tracking these supply vessels for 2 years, building a detailed map of America's dependencies. This wasn't about seizing cargo, it was about sending a message. Agreed, Khanzadi replied, but this conversation never happened. What conversation? Kellerman said, and ended the call. Within minutes, the Iranian speedboats peeled away. Torres watched them go, her heart still racing, wondering what kind of diplomatic miracle had just occurred. The Baltic Horizon continued its journey, arriving in San Diego 31 days later. Its cargo was unloaded at night under heavy security and distributed to maintenance facilities across 3 states. But the incident triggered a classified investigation that would unravel everything. A young analyst at the Defense Logistics Agency named Marcus Chen started pulling threads, tracing serial numbers and shipping manifests. What he discovered made him physically ill. The targeting computer in every active FA-18, chips manufactured in a facility 12 miles from Shenzhen, China. The hydraulic systems in the F-35's control surfaces, machined in a factory outside Hanoi that was 40% owned by a Vietnamese state enterprise. The advanced composites and stealth aircraft, sourced from suppliers in countries that weren't even formal US allies. Chen's 247-page report landed on Kellerman's desk 3 weeks after the Baltic Horizon incident. The Admiral read it twice, then locked it in his safe. He knew that if this information became public, it would trigger a political earthquake. Congress would demand immediate reshoring of all defense manufacturing, a process that would take 15 years and cost $340 billion, according to Pentagon estimates. In the meantime, US naval aviation capabilities would be severely compromised, but the secret was already leaking. An encrypted file appeared on the phone of a New York Times defense correspondent. Then a redacted version showed up on a congressman's desk. Within 72 hours, 3 senior Pentagon officials had quietly submitted their resignations, claiming personal reasons. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. US military aviation depends on foreign supply chains vulnerable to disruption, read the headline. The article detailed everything: the Baltic Horizon incident, the network of foreign suppliers, the potential choke points, the years of ignored warnings. The political fallout was immediate and severe. Congressional hearings were scheduled. Allies questioned America's military readiness. Adversaries took notes. And somewhere in the South China Sea, another cargo ship carrying similar components adjusted its route, taking a longer path that avoided contested waters. Commander Torres, who never learned the full story of what she'd protected that night, continued flying missions. But sometimes, when she powered up her Super Hornet, she wondered about all those components, all those chips and servos and processors, and how many miles they'd traveled. The American military remained the most powerful in the world, but it was powerful because of a fragile web of global dependencies that most citizens never knew existed. A web that could be cut at any moment by geopolitical tensions, natural disasters, or the decisions of governments on the other side of the world. And that realization kept people like Admiral Kellerman awake at night, staring at maps of shipping routes and choke points, doing calculations about response times, knowing that American air superiority wasn't just about pilots and training and technology. It was about 847 components on a ship in the Persian Gulf and whether they made it home. Silence, music. Swell or slight pause in narration to let visuals breathe. The fighter jet screamed across the Persian Gulf at Mach 1.2, its pilot's hands no longer trembling. Below, cargo ships continued their endless journeys. And in darkened offices across Washington, analysts continued tracking every vessel, every component, every vulnerability, knowing that the next crisis was always one incident away. In Tehran, Admiral Khanzadi continued his silent surveillance. In Beijing, analysts compiled their own maps of American dependencies. And in the Strait of Hormuz, another cargo ship approached, its manifest listing agricultural equipment, its containers holding the future of American air superiority. Across the world, other nations watched and learned. Smaller countries began auditing their own military dependencies. New suppliers emerged, but the web had taken decades to build and couldn't be untangled overnight. The global military-industrial complex had evolved beyond any single nation's control. Marcus Chen received a commendation for his report and a quiet transfer to a less sensitive position. Admiral Kellerman retired 6 months later, his secret deal with Iran never disclosed. Torres flew 200 more missions, trusting her aircraft, never knowing how close she'd come to triggering a war over parts from 8,000 miles away. Congressional hearings led to new oversight. Politicians gave speeches about American manufacturing. But the cargo ships kept sailing, the components kept flowing, because unraveling them would mean admitting that American military dominance was built on a foundation that could crumble with a single blocked strait. And so the secret remained. Every citizen who felt safe under the protection of the world's most powerful military never knew they were watching a miracle of global logistics. The jets flew, the ships sailed, and somewhere another analyst was discovering just how fragile strength could be.